Hi everyone, welcome to this latest edition of Supply Chain Talk. My name is Duncan Brock. I'm delighted to have the opportunity to host these Supply Chain Talks on a regular basis, and we hope that you find the content really interesting. This is the latest in the series. My colleague last week, Sam, hosted one talking about sustainability and the challenges of focusing on that within the current environment. And this week we're going to have a different topic. We're going to have a different topic with different experts. And this one is looking at omni-channel and multi-channel and the different approaches and business strategies that are associated with those issues. And I will have three great experts to join me to open up that conversation and to really talk that through in some detail. Please do get involved. If you're watching this live, there is a chat function. I think there's always some comments already in the chat from Supply Chain Elf. So thank you to him. But also, if you've got any specific questions, you can put them in the Q&A, and I'll make sure that I keep an eye on what's coming through and give a chance to open this up to some of the people to answer some of the questions that come through from that. So please do get involved. It's great to get you participating. And a couple of Jameses, hi to you both. Good to see that you're both joining us today. So, as I said, it's interactive. There's no slides. This is very much talking about issues within the supply chain. So, the second half of the session will be focusing on this omni-channel and multi-channel topic. But the first half, we actually want to talk about some more topical issues that are in the news. And there's a specific news article we're going to look at. But just before we go to the news article, let me bring in my first guest. So, if Tom, if you could just turn on your video and your microphone, thank you. So I'd like to welcome Tom Rose from SPAR International to join, and he's going to help me to sort of look at this news item that we're going to look at first. So Tom, welcome to you. But maybe just for the people who are watching, quick intro to yourself, you and your role within SPAR.
Okay, so thank you, Duncan. My name's Tom Rose. I'm the head of operations for SPAR International. I think probably a lot of you will know us for convenience and proximity stores in the UK. SPAR actually trades through 13,500 stores in 48 countries, through 32 online operations as well. And we run across the globe 248 warehouses. So my role is working in our international team, supporting the individual countries in their development, particularly around supply chain and the whole cycle from the production line through to the shelf, logistics and our DC development and development programs, data services, retail systems, and our digital platforms.
So you're not busy at the moment at all. I mean, there's no issues in retail. There's no problems with that at all. So I'm sure we'll explore that as we go through. And that probably brings us to the news item as well, though, because what we'd like to do is sort of touch on this news item. But actually, when you're talking about supply chain issues at the moment, it's probably every item in the news is about supply chain. And even our Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, happened to sort of talk about it about 3 or 4 times. And I know he did a conference speech today as well, saying, the supply chains will sort themselves out, I think was his phrase. But the article that we're going to pick up this week was the one that was in The Guardian. And actually, it was quite an interesting one. It was looking about the supply chain issues in 6 major economies. And actually, if you do look at the article itself, and if you do look at the issues, every economy is having a problem. And I think sometimes we sit in our own economy and go, oh, well, we're the only ones that are suffering. But I think when you look at the US with their issues with containers, massive labor shortages, inflation coming through, look at Germany, same sort of issues that they're facing as well. China is having a problem, both with inflationary pressures, but also with electricity supply issues, which is then causing factory shutdowns because they're trying to reduce emissions, and therefore they've got shortages going through there. Russia's got problems with labor and with inflation. And I'm sure, Tom, we can spend a long time talking about the UK challenges and issues that's coming through. But I think what's really interesting to me in this is that every single country is suffering some form of issues and delays and issues around that. And I think that's the one that's is coming through quite strongly from everything that's there. So when we've got these issues going through, What's your view, Tom? And what's your view about the perspective that every single country is suffering some sort of issues? In the UK, we're suffering them. I mean, what's your perspective on this?
We would certainly recognise that. It's interesting you mentioned the supply chain in the news. I don't think I remember a time when the supply chain has ever been as much in the news. So I think it's an area that is very topical, but in itself, I think that's actually breeding some of our challenges. So supply chains work on rhythm, they work on flow, and therefore actually sharp changes in demand cause actual unnecessary spikes in the supply chain. If you look at the UK fuel crisis, that started from a couple of forecourts being out of petrol to a driver problem to the army now being brought in to do a petrol. And lots of the experts in the industry at the time were saying if people just bought normally, it wouldn't be so much of a problem. So I think it's great to see our industry in the news as much of awareness, but maybe for causing the wrong reactions. Okay. From a worldwide point of view, we see disruption in all of our countries. I've just been talking at the end of last week to my colleagues in the Netherlands, where we're based, and they saw a high single-digit failure in inbound because of driver problems.
Right.
That then has the relevant knock-on effects to demand and demand in store. We're seeing now increasingly we're having to increase buffer stocks in our warehouses, so that we're trying to de-risk that downstream supply chain. But we're seeing it in all markets. Talking to colleagues in South Africa, they've got a driver shortage as well. Guess what? Drivers are actually going to the US because of the driver shortage there, which is then causing a driver shortage in South Africa. Who knew? So I think we're seeing that in everywhere. I think it is very much driven by trends that were in the market for a long while. Drivers and the driver population aging and not enough people coming in has been there for years.
Right.
But the pandemic has exacerbated some of those challenges. Okay, and particularly what we're seeing in multiple countries, whether it be Chinese people going into Russia, or whether it be Russian people going into Eastern Europe, or Eastern Europeans coming into Western Europe. What we've seen is during the pandemic, people went back home. And actually they've found other jobs being back home, and they prefer being back home closer to their families, and they're not coming back again.
Yeah.
Okay. And that's the area, I think it's not just drivers. We're seeing it in warehouse colleagues. Okay. We're seeing it in production centers. We run a lot of production centers. We're seeing it in all of those areas. Recruiting people, keeping them in a very competitive market. It's very much around how we look after people. And we're seeing it come through in inflation and pay.
It's interesting what you said, though, because what you're saying is, in effect, this has been building for a period of time. And it's only when the economies started to open up that people started to understand that actually some of this labour shortages are feeding all the way through, aren't they? And it's through every supply chain. And obviously in retail, we're seeing the problems and some of the, you talked about buffer stocks. I mean, 2 years ago, no one was talking about buffer stocks, were they? I mean, everyone was talking about that lean flow of time deliveries into the warehousing that was going to flow all the way through. And then suddenly we're back to some of that sort of protection because of the problems that's been caused across the piece. And that's a very different business model for you. I'm
sorry, say again?
It's a very different business model, maybe from where you were.
I'm not sure it's a different business model. It's certainly an evolution of the model that we were running. And I think, in one of the news articles, Rishi Sunak, talks about low-cost labour, and I know it's been one of Boris's big things with the protection of Brexit. But we see that in all markets, and it's that low-cost migrant labour force that has gone back home that's now not coming back. If I look at Hungary, look at Austria. A lot of our workforce in Austria comes from Hungary.
Right.
Yeah, but then when you look at a lot of the workforce in Hungary, it comes from other countries because migrant sectors are moving around. Okay, and that I think is part of it. So I don't think it changes the model particularly. We're certainly having to invest in slightly higher safety stocks to maintain availability, and we're having to work a lot harder in the background. If I look at Ireland, last week we collected over a third of the product coming into our warehouse because suppliers were struggling to deliver in. So we're having to think differently about how we do things.
Right.
But the model is fundamentally the same.
Yeah. Okay. No, that's really good. And I'm sure we're building this as well, Tom, as we go forward in terms of looking at the different strategies and business strategies. But let me bring in the other two guests, if I may. So if I could invite Richard Wilding and Javier Lorenzo to also sort of join us. So welcome to the two of you. We've got you both there, which is great. So
hello.
Thanks for joining, Richard, and thanks for joining Javier.
Hello, Duncan.
Hi. So let's keep on. Let's get a quick intro to the two of you first. So Richard, quick intro to yourself first, please.
Okay. So I'm Professor of Supply Chain Strategy at Cranfield University. I often say that my role is to challenge and inspire supply chain and business leaders to innovate. So that's a big part of what I do. And of course, Cranfield, we're very much a postgraduate university talking about management and technology. And we've got one of the largest groups looking at supply chain. We work with companies all over the world. So we're pretty connected in with some of the challenges which businesses are currently having to deal with. I'm also on the global board of trustees of the Chartered Institute of Procurement and Supply.
Yeah, so playing the critical friend role, I think that's what you play on the board of trustees. So welcome to you, Richard. And as you say, I think you're also very popular in the news as well. I think I know you give quite a lot of commentary and invited into
perspective on Radio 5 Live just this morning, talking about precisely the issue you're discussing. And I think it is really important that, as Tom says, this is not a UK specific phenomenon. Some of the challenges we're having, this is a global challenge at the moment. The way I sort of look at it is it's a bit like a tsunami. You know how the sea goes out, so the demand sea disappeared completely just over a year or so ago. And it now the tsunami wave is in demand is coming in. We're seeing imports into Europe up 153% over last year, the highest growth rates in 80 years. And basically, many supply chains just cannot cope with that. That's creating container issues, driver shortages. Everybody wants everything. Well, the energy shortages, as we've been discussing, is just a big result of that. The amount of energy which people are currently needing is far in excess of where things were. So, all these challenges are coming together, which is then knocking on with inflation, trouble with shipping, lorry drivers, you name it.
And I think it's really interesting when you sort of then hear the politicians, and particularly in the UK, saying, "Oh well, the supply chain will sort itself out." And I know, that was always done as it will sort itself out, but there's quite a significant need to change some fundamentals in that supply chain, which I think Tom was touching on earlier, for it to sort itself out. And there's quite a lot of fundamental problems there to solve, and maybe we'll come back and touch on some of those. But maybe again, Javier, maybe we can do a quick intro to you. So welcome. So quick intro to you, and then your perspective on this story.
Thank you, Duncan, for having me. Hello, everybody. Well, my name is Javier Bazañez. I am the Managing Director for Latam and USA for Alcott Global. And we are in Alcott Global. We are connectors and headhunting in supply chain and helping placing together all the players in the supply chain. Basically, my background is having been in supply chain directions in different kind of business. Basically, my initial career were in food manufacturing, consumer goods, with big multinational like P&G, BAT, Mondelez.
and working in different geographies in Latin America, Central America, also with Cargill in poultry business and processing meat, and also a little also an experience in the GCC countries in Saudi Arabia and UAE. Very interesting, and also very interesting supply chains in the kind of food, and also in the technologies of the kind of refrigeration and chiller equipment there in that area. No, so now I'm working with Alcott, trying with all this expertise, was trying to place together and helping people looking for solving their issues in supply chain, and trying to find and supply the right talent, specifically in these last 2-3 years that the skill have been changing. The Internet of Things having a big impact in role analytics, in artificial intelligence. So everything's in the place, but not only the technology is important, as you need to have good skills in leadership, in connector, and making things happen. No. And sometimes I say that we're in supply chain, we are like the all board connector of fine lines, just placing everybody together, and instead looking for the claims to everybody, just looking for the solution. This is what our main role in the supply chain. And talking about all this disruption, definitely in Latin America and USA have been a big impact in that case. So you already know all the big jams in Los Angeles port and another port in USA, plus road problems and availability of drivers. And that have also the big impact for all Latin America that depend from the main economy of America, that is US. So that has been a big disruption in products. So people that not having products in the supermarket that normal used to find. But at the end, I think the company have been moving ahead, trying to look for solution and having the different strategies of distribution centers, allocating product more locally or more closer to the final consumer. That is totally opposite of what we have been doing in previous years. No? So it's very interesting how we are moving now with the technology to try to be closer to a consumer that is more with more restrictions, but a consumer that want speed and fast the service than before. So that is the critical condition that we are fronting now, and we as Alcott Global, well, you know, soon we will have our summit in November 11th, and we will be talking about all these issues that would be very interesting to have that conversation and all the impression of everybody. No.
That's great, Javier. Thank you. And you brought in a whole different perspective there. So actually, where are you based at the moment? I see you lived all over the world.
Say again, sorry.
Where are you living at the moment?
Okay, and now I'm currently doing a project in Spain, in Murcia. Okay. So, but just closing together with Latin and USA for doing all this project with Alcott Global.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. So questions just come up actually from Trudy, which is around, probably it's talking about this buffer stocks that Tom, you touched on earlier, that if you're starting to build up stocks to manage delays, how can that be a strategy when there's now a shortage of warehouse space? Because obviously there's that sort of knock-on impact, and especially for specialized products, are you not starting to that's in effect causing another long-term problem in warehousing space across the country and countries? Is that?
Yeah. So let's be careful of my comments. I wouldn't describe it as a strategy. It's a reaction to circumstance. As retailers, our number one priority is to maintain availability to our customers. So the more volatile your upstream supply chain is, the more you need to try and protect that within your operations to protect the downstream supply chain. So, buffering is one element of that. And buffering, it might be that we keep 1 week's worth of stock rather than 3 days worth of stock. We're not talking about mountains of stock, because again, we work in a short shelf life industry where I can't afford to hold high stock quantities because of product life. But buffering is a method of trying to protect downstream availability from upstream volatility.
Right. And Richard, I mean, just bringing you in there, I mean, I think Cranfield is surrounded by warehouses. That sort of whole sort of centre of the UK is just that whole connected area. I mean,
we're in the golden rectangle, so it's basically, if you've got a facility located near us, you can get stuff to about 96% of the population within an hour or so. So we are very much in that centre. And I mean, there is very much a shortage of warehouse space, and it's interesting because this was occurring as well just before Brexit, of course, because people thought, we need more warehouse. And actually, interestingly enough, talking to some businesses, they've done very well out of this because they had these big plans for Brexit. They put in loads and loads of inventory, expecting disruption from that source. In fact, what actually happened was they ended up with, the pandemic disruption, but they had all this stuff. I was chatting to one, for example, ovens, white goods supplier who filled up a great big warehouse. They were the only one who was then able to supply during the pandemic and everything else. And they just, mopped up the market with regards to that. So there's been some sort of, some luckiness. And I think this is one of the really important things to think about, is because the way we've managed supply chains traditionally is people have been screaming for the last 30 years, as long as I can remember, saying, we need better forecasts. We need better forecasts. The problem is at the moment is that the disruption that we have gone through in the past 12 months mean a lot of our forecasting is we haven't even got the time series to be able to do any reasonable forecasts. So you end up in a situation where, I often say, and I tell this to my students, there's only two types of forecasts. There's lucky ones and wrong ones. And what you have to hope is that by putting a bit of work into this, you can be a bit luckier. But actually what we have to understand is that, forecasting as we know it has really changed. And so the concept, one of the big concepts people have been talking about during the past few years is something called the bimodal supply chain. And they talk about mode one is the focus on the predictable, it's lean, it's, all those predictable things we can do. And mode two is all about, exploration, it's agile, it's moving in all those, supply chain 4.0 type technologies and clever Internet of Things technologies, but this is very exploratory. The problem is that, in the old normal, 80% of what we did was probably in mode one, and maybe a smaller percentage was in that mode two. What's actually happened is there's been a massive change around, and we're having to run our supply chains in, if you like, a mode two agile way of working. And that is really creating some challenges. So one of the things I was writing about last year was we literally have the old normal. We have something called the pre-new normal, which is a bit of a clumsy term. But what we're talking about is we're using the old processes, the old infrastructure equipment, the old information systems, and if you like, the old people, but not the old people. What I mean is the old people skills and everything else to try and run a supply chain in a completely new way. And actually, what we need to do is change all our processes, all our infrastructure and networks need to change, probably the information systems and everything else. This is a big task, and it's not going to be something we can fix tomorrow. We've got to completely readjust for a whole new marketplace, and that's what's happening as we move into the new normal.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's an interesting challenge in the warehousing. I agree with what Richard's saying completely. In the amount of product in warehousing. Question, and I don't know the answer to this for the UK. I know in a few other markets. How much of what we store in warehouses is actually storage versus distribution stock? How much of it is actually turning versus how much is just things clogging up space? And actually, is it a shortage of not just total space, but is that because we are not flowing enough product, it's actually being stuck in storage.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I used to like tease my warehousing colleagues. I'd say, well, basically, if you're not careful, warehouses become the rubbish bins of industry, right? And, you know, if you look at my kitchen rubbish bin, I'm not very disciplined. So what happens is you have a rubbish bin full of rubbish, and then you generally have a carrier bag next to that full of rubbish. And if you're not careful, you end up with a warehouse full of stuff which actually customers don't really need. So then you go and rent or buy more warehousing to fill that one up as well. And that's like the carrier bag next to it. And then eventually you say, you know, you go for a stockless manufacturing site, and before you know it, you've got a pile of stock around there. Now that's painting. That is not how warehousing should be used. You know, warehousing can be an absolutely value-adding type of activity if it is used appropriately, you know, because you're able to serve and compete and do some very good stuff with it. Just look at people who do this really well, you know, like people like, I guess, Amazon and you know, many other organizations, but they're using those as particular tools and capabilities to be able to serve customers better. But yeah, you're absolutely right, Tom. If we're not careful, we end up with a warehouse just being a big industrial rubbish bin. And that's not what we want.
And that could be, I will add to that point, because very, very clear point, that also you have the spices of that the more movement of the warehouses are moving now for a 3PL or 4PL industry. So all the old manufacturing company, all the multinational are giving more pressure to the 3PL operators with all the strategy, all the planning, all the spaces. So it's getting more complicated, the situation as you presented before. So it's a balance, no? Because you have your customers giving a lot of pressure on that side of the operation of the warehouses.
Yeah, I think it's going to be really interesting when you start to look at the annual reports from some of these big organizations going forward, and what they're sort of, I suppose, you used to be very proud about your inventory turns and where it was going to, and all the sort of stats that are around that. I think we're going to see some very different metrics coming through as it goes through. But I think back to your point, Tom, it is going to be very interesting to see just what's stuck. Because we all know that's the downside of the warehouses and the drive there. I actually want to just change tack if I can now, because one of the topics the topic we wanted to cover on this session was around this view about the different business strategies, and we were talking about omni-channel versus multi-channel strategies, the way forward on those, and whether or not that's the approach is changing as you go forward. And when this topic first came up, I was probably I'm a procurement guy more than a supply chain person. And I was sat there going, so what is the difference between omni-channel and multi-channel? And I know, Richard, when we were having a chat yesterday in preparation for this, you had some definitions.
I was having a look through some of my... So this is something actually which 8-9 years old, we started talking about it, and my team at Cranfield, we've done quite a lot of work sort of looking around this area, but we had to define it, and I have a couple of definitions. So we'll kick off with multi-channel. So multi-channel retailing, the development of a retail operation in such a manner that enables the customer to transact with the business, browse, buy, or return through independently managed channels, including retail stores, online stores, mobile app stores, and telephone sales. Omni-channel retailing is a truly integrated approach across the whole retail operation that delivers a seamless response to the consumer experience through all available shopping channels, whether on mobile, internet devices, computers, in-store, on television, and in catalogs. So really the difference between multi-channel and omni-channel is multi-channel is independently managed channels, and some businesses do that extremely well, and they don't want the mix to mix the two up, mainly because of the cost to serve. Okay, omni-channel is very much an integrated approach around, you know, the whole retail operation, and I think that this is where it gets really interesting, because I know that Tom's got some fantastic examples of these. But one of the things which, you know, as you're going on this journey, the winners and losers that we've seen over the last 8 years, you could argue, have been those who have been really careful about reflecting on the cost to serve particular customers. And so, you know, we've seen a lot of people moving online during the pandemic. So we've seen organizations quoting, you know, our sales are up, you know, great high sales, but hey, our profits are right down. Why? Because they're actually losing money on that particular route. But I think Tom is going to be able to talk us about some great examples of what you guys are doing.
Yeah, I think, Richard, thank you. I think, it depends on your development position in a particular market or a particular country. And I think, we would maybe in introducing e-commerce into some of our countries, it would be more of a multi-channel approach. But we have to go with the customer, and we now follow the digital customer journey. Okay, and this is, we see, if I talk India, the customers can view their product on the app or on the website. When you run out of your cornflakes, you can scan the barcode on the packet and add it to your shopping list. Okay, so you make the point of decision to purchase at the point of need, not at the point you decide where you're going to go and do your shopping, because you're building those shopping lists. We're seeing, our app in India can look at the different things in your shopping basket and go, oh, well, actually, you could cook this meal. Do you want to add these things to your basket as well? Okay, so you're constantly interacting with the customer throughout their daily lives at a digital level. And then the customer gets to choose, actually, do I want it delivered? Okay, well, I'll click, order online and I'll have it delivered to me because I don't have a lot of time this week. Actually, the times aren't convenient. So I'll choose to click and collect, and I'll get the store to pick it for me, but I'll go and collect it from the store. Okay. Or actually, I've got a bit of time today. Actually, I'd like to browse, because people actually like to browse. They like the shopping experience. They don't always have the time for it, but people do like to come into the stores. So actually, I want to go into the store. So I bring my app, and actually now the app will navigate me around the store to find the products in the most efficient way, and will highlight opportunities and things I might have missed or I might have forgotten. You've not brought salt for 3 weeks. Oh, you might want to buy it now. But it's around that whole integrated experience.
Yeah.
I think Javier, I'm going to come to you in a minute, but I think there's a question here about, is shopping habits going to change forever? And I think that's quite a good question here, because what you just described there is a very different way of shopping, a very different way from a consumer doing it, but also the way your business then has to react to that is different. So do you see, Tom, that being the way forward? Is that how you would see now over the next few years, the more of that interaction and more of that flexible approach will be there?
The easy answer is absolutely, but I think it's very different for different markets. It depends on the customer and the technology adoption in markets, okay? Right. Because all countries aren't equal. Yeah. So I think the direction of travel absolutely is that. And has retail changed? Absolutely. As economies are opening up, we are seeing a drop in the use of some of these types of technologies, but nowhere near back to the level they were pre the pandemic. So it has absolutely been a seismic shift in the way customers work. My sister-in-law always went shopping. She was forced to order online and click and collect. And at least every other week now they choose to click and collect. Right. Because they found it really easy. It was more efficient use of time. She'll never go back.
Yeah, it's changed the demographics as well. So if I think about my 80-year-old father, he would always, go to his local supermarket, walk around it and do his shopping. All of a sudden he discovered he could get everything delivered to, home. And that's just opened up a whole wealth of things, The biggest chaos I've created in the last 12 months was helping my wife sort out an eBay account and a PayPal account. And there's no stopping her now. But, this is the point. It forced the issue that people had to try out these new things. And I don't think we are going to have us going completely back. But people, talking, my father, he is now going physically shopping, but he's supplementing it with online shopping as well. So, so you are seeing a bit of a drop off in terms of what he's doing, but he is doing that. And I think that that's part of what we're finding. I mean, one of the key things which I was talking about, if you're thinking about retail, I generally tell people, what people used to want was, if you want to get somebody into a shop, it needs to be fun, it needs to be easy, and they need to be in control. Okay. Now, the thing that happened in COVID is it needs to be fun, it needs to be easy, the customer needs to feel in control, but they also need to feel safe. And I can tell you what, going to my local supermarket, it wasn't fun. It wasn't particularly easy. I didn't feel in control walking through one-way systems and everything else, and I didn't feel particularly safe. But hey, sitting in front of the TV, watching Netflix, right, and ordering on my phone, all of a sudden was a lot more fun, much more easy. I was in control, and I was totally safe. And I think that this is the type of thing that we're going to start seeing is going back to the fundamentals of how can we create more of an experience within the retail sector. And that's where omnichannel can really come into its own, as Tom has been explaining, by, hey, what about the recipes? Just think about this, think about that. And hopefully that is then going to enable, if you like, those more profitable customers, because, you might be able to say, if you just buy this one more ingredient, you can then make this very special dish. That will then mean, hopefully, that ingredient's super high margin. So then you're able to really sort of change some of those things which are going on. So this is really the thing that's happening. But we have to recognize there are some retailers who have not gone down the omni-channel route. They can make very good money by just focusing on that multi-channel route. And I think that's very much a strategic decision which businesses have to make.
Yeah. I would like to say, yes, there definitely will be a mix. That's right. We will never come back again to the level that we have of multi-channel previously pandemic, because we have been there changing the way of consuming, changing the way of the customer, and the consumer is looking for the things that he needs. Now at internet, they can have almost all the brochure of everything that you want to buy. And with the virtual reality that some companies are developing, so almost you can test the product on your hands in the desk of your office, no? But still, what I'm saying is that we are social. I mean, the human being is a social guy. You need the contact, you need to touch, you need to test the product in your hand. Maybe, yes, the young consumers, depending on the age, they will be asking for fast and very speed delivery. I know that product, I know that how it's working, so just fulfill my warehouse, my stock at home. But there are other people that like to test, like to check. They will go to the supermarket, they will go to the store, yes, but maybe with a previous analysis on the website, how is it, what is the different offers, and I will be taking a final decision in the store, just watching the product, and maybe coming back and order online in Amazon. I don't know. But that is the difference, no? But also, what I can imagine also, that all the time there are different customer behavior. And I would like to kind of remind of my past experience in tobacco. When you are buying cigarettes or something like that, there is different point of view of buying. The guy that is buying the stuff for the house, the guy that is buying just a convenience store, or the guy that is enjoying the moment and taking a cigar or cigarette. So these totally different behaviors that for that time you need to be in the place of where is the guy is getting the entertainment or getting the need. So that will be a balance. There will be totally product, and almost everything will be electronically. But definitely there are other portfolio that you need to be still in that social contact with your final customer, no? And what you can do, because people are saying, okay, you can try to make more distribution centers and being closer and delivering directly to the final customer. And so that is totally different to what we were talking about centralization. But I think that the part of this tendency that we have been having with this COVID-19, that we have been detecting another opportunities of efficiencies and consolidation to serve better the customer. That is centralizing all the background processes that you have, taking orders, analyzing, placing shared service, and that part of the administration of the supply chain, I think that is taking the edge in terms of doing centralization, nearshoring for services, and this is what is doing getting the savings or getting the cost reduction for supply chain. I think that will be the real opportunity in the future in that kind of consolidation, and because the customer at the end will not will not feel any different. Maybe the different will be more efficient, more speed out, etc. But I just consolidating in the backwards in the background the company that are serving the customer.
I'd fully agree. Retail, humans are sociable animals, and in retail for years we talk about retail theatre and creating an environment of engagement and entertainment. But I think it is all about reacting and evolving customer demand. And picking up on a couple of your examples, Javier, around somebody that wants the cigars or the bottle of wine. What we're seeing rapidly develop in many countries now, which I suppose is another part of probably more of a multi-channel experience at the moment, is quick commerce. These operators now that have so much venture capital behind them that are offering 10-minute deliveries. We've got one in Amsterdam that will do a 10-minute delivery 24 hours a day on 2,000 products. Okay. And literally, when you look at from what we can see, you look at their order sizes, 2 bottles of Prosecco and a box of strawberries. That's their order because that's what somebody fancied at that moment in time. So rather than going down to the store for those local pickup lines, we're now starting to see a whole market or a whole extra channel develop around quick on-demand commerce.
But I think that also then brings in your point, Richard, a bit earlier, and I think, Javier, you also pulled it up, which is that cost to serve. That actually, there's a price to pay for that 10-minute delivery. There's a price to pay for that. So, I know sort of Deliveroo doing it and others are doing it on the grocery store. But actually, when you look at the amount they charge you, are they really covering their costs, or is it just sort of at the moment we're pulling customers in, but at some point, I think your point, Javier, is that they need to get the supply chains a lot more leaner, a bit more effective, maybe a lot more local, because otherwise they're not going to be able to serve those customers in the way that customers are now expecting to be served.
And it's a really interesting point, Javier, I wanted to pick up in there, in that for me, it's about optimizing the end-to-end supply chain. And that's the area we spend a lot of time on. It's looking at how the products, not in our individual silos and how we make sure that things are efficient as possible in our silo. It's looking at the whole product from the production line through to the shelf or through to the customer and how those products flow. We've just done a big piece of supply chain mapping analysis in one of our Southern African countries. The product comes out of Europe and actually has 5 transit points before it arrives in our warehouse. That's 5 lots of vehicles. That's 5 lots of, a boat and 4 lots of vehicles. And that's a whole load of handling off one lorry onto another lorry. And we say we haven't got enough drivers. Well, actually, if we bring in a central consolidation point into one of our DCs and then flow it through the DC network, on existing vehicles that are doing return legs that potentially are empty. Okay, well, actually, all of a sudden, I need a ship and I need 1 inbound vehicle. And then I use our existing network. Have we got a driver shortage, or are we just using too many?
That's right.
That's a really good point. And I think that probably there's one other question that came in from James about, I think Javier, you've already touched on it, about global production and more local production going everywhere. Will we start to get a lot more SMEs and startups coming into supply chain? And I think that's probably, in a way, the question's answering itself, which is I think we all view that will happen. And those shorter supply chains. But as you just described there, Tom, there's also maybe a chance of having people looking differently as supply chains, and mapping them again and starting to take a fresh look at how they do flow, because maybe it has been a bit neglected over time.
So, I mean, if we look at some of the developments which are taking place, for example, if you're looking at supply chain 4.0 technologies, for example, nano factories, these are small factories which are the size of containers. Unilever has been piloting these and actually moving these. You can literally move them and put them in a car park, or you can put them into, you know, an existing just a warehouse shed. Now, why do we want to do that? What we want to do is actually produce the items close to the customer, because it actually means that we can actually produce more of what the customer wants. The challenge is we still have to move the raw materials. And I think we have to recognize that, you know, at the end of the day, you know, mangoes only grow in certain climates. And, you know, we have to sort of think that we can't have everything just very, very local. But I think, you know, as, you know, if we're looking at, say, the United Kingdom, one of the things which I think is relatively clear this Christmas, for example, we're going to have a little bit less choice. Now, what does that mean in reality? You know, I mean, I love my ginger preserve, you know, marmalade. I had to actually substitute for orange and ginger marmalade. Now, you know, it's not a total game changer, but I had less choice when I went there because of the current situation. So, you know, everybody's still going to have a Christmas, but you're probably going to have less choice than you used to. And we saw that during the pandemic anyway. You know, for example, just rationalization on pasta. You know, one leading retailer in the UK, you know, they had something like 60 different pasta shapes coming in. They rationalized that down to 7. Now, of course, you know, all this variety attracts demand, attracts customers, but do we really need it? And if we're just focusing on the 7, we can manage things far, far more effectively and efficiently through the supply chain. If we're able to think about that, and then also think about what Tom was saying and thinking about our way we use our lorry drivers and everything else, we can actually reduce the wastage. We can actually, you know, manage things more effectively, and that's really going to help. But I think that's going to be an interesting debate, because what we've seen is in retail is, you know, the number of lines in some of the big supermarkets, 30,000 plus. The smaller ones might be having, you know, 2,000 to 3,000. What is the optimal now that we actually need to serve the customers with what they want?
And that optimization of range, I think, is a really crucial point, Richard. You know, one of our leading manufacturers of fabric softener, you know, has 22 different flavors of fabric softener. 89% of the sales come out of 2 of them. Do we really need the other 20? Yeah.
That's
You talk to my marketing colleagues, we absolutely do. But yeah, I think it is that range review, range rationalization, potentially is an area that you know, not just retailers, but the industry needs to be thinking about.
No, and you have a very good point, and this is the time for doing that rationalization right now, because you need to analyze the 80-20. Who is giving me the 80% of the income, the revenues, and forget the other presentation. I mean, no, for sure, you need to do the analysis in volume and in revenue or margin. That's right. But at the end, for sure, there are a lot of companies that have a lot of SKUs that are pure garbage. So this is the opportunity to save some money, to make it more lean, the supply chain, the manufacturing, all the processes, and concentrate that funds or efforts in serving maybe a good structure, a good idea for that omni-channel concept for serving the customer. This is what the company should be moving the money, the expenses. That's right.
Yeah, but I think probably the final point here is the change needs investment, doesn't it? I mean, you've already touched on investments in skills. It needs investment in the technology. It needs investment in the ability to sort of reshape these supply chains. And maybe that's a topic for another session, because I think the need to build up that, you know, focus on the areas that are going to change and how to reshape them is going to be really important. I can't believe we run out of time because this has been fascinating, wide-ranging discussion, and I think we did cover a lot in here. But there's quite a few threads here of things that I think we should come back to in these going forward, of the focus on this critical topic for us all in terms of how we shape and reshape supply chains going forward. And there's probably a couple of points that we wanted to touch more on this topic of omni-channel and multi-channel, which we'll probably have to come back to as well. But I'm very conscious that we are out of time. So I'd just like to thank the three of you. It's been excellent. I've actually done very little. You three have just spoken to each other for the last 45 minutes, which has been brilliant. But Tom, Richard, Javier, thank you very much for joining me on this Supply Chain Talk. It's been excellent to have you with us, and I'm sure it's been of real interest to the people watching. So thank you to all three of you. I just a bit of a plug for next week. So next week, my colleague Sam is going to be hosting. We're going to continue this focus on supply chain, but it's going to be looking at disruptive events and how does the supply chain cope with disruptive events and the approach that's needed there, because we've had a few over the last 18 months or so, and we'll have a lot more going forward, as we know. So it's going to be a really interesting conversation I think we'll have next week as well. So thanks everyone for watching. I hope you've enjoyed it. Please do tune in again to the next episode, and please do keep coming in with your comments and your questions as we go forward. But anyway, Tom, Richard, Javier, thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Doctor.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye-bye.